Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Michaela Peters. I was looking back at all the videos that I've done, and one of the ones that seems like it was most interesting to people was my biggest culture shock living in Finland. And the thing that I noticed about that video that not a lot of other videos have had is that it was told in more of a storytelling fashion. So today I'm going to talk to you about what I learned about friendship from living in Finland. However, I'm going to also illustrate that with a bit of a personal story and maybe stories of other people. So I'm going to start this off by saying what I knew about how friendship was in Finland prior to me going to Finland. I went to Finland as a Fulbright scholar, as I already explained, and prior to going to Finland, we had a sort of Fulbright meeting on Zoom where we talked to some of the Americans who were already over there. And I remember what one of the guys said, and he was from New York, so not too far from New Jersey, also pretty densely populated. And he was like, due to the sparsity of population in Finland, what I found is that I have come to appreciate the relationships that I have in Finland in a way that I never would have if I were in the US. Again, because of the density thing. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's interesting. Not knowing what this is someday going to mean for me. When I first moved to Finland, I go downstairs to get a mattress from the guy who's living below me. That's a thing that I really had a hard time with in Finland, which was that you have to provide your own mattress. So it's like you're super tired, and then you're like, great, now I need a place to sleep after I just came off this long flight. Anyway, I saw that there were some mattresses in the storage unit of the guy below me, and I go knock on his door to ask him, hey, can I buy these off of you? To which the answer is yes, and I end up with some mattresses. We start talking a little bit, and he starts telling me all about how, oh, I hate living in Lappeenranta, and I really want to move. I think I'm going to move to Lahti, because Lahti is still near Helsinki, and there aren't, it's not such a small town that everybody knows what's going on, everybody's in your business. He's like, I hate that about being here. Like, everybody knows everything about everyone, and you have no privacy. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe that guy has this problem, but I'm not going to have that problem because I'm pretty into my work and I lay pretty low, and that's definitely not going to be an issue for me. Well, I could not have been more incorrect, if I'm being honest, which, looking back, it's still even shocking to me kind of how things went down while I was living there. I think that one of the hardest things for me personally with living in Finland was the amount of intimacy that I experienced within my friendships being so different to that which I experienced in the US, enjoying it a lot and then losing it. I was once reading a Psychology Today article, which is one of my favorite places to read articles, Psychology Today, that was talking about you can often measure the value of a relationship by the pain of the loss. And I had a lot of friends and people in my life who I did lose while I was in Finland, and it's not like I lost them because I went back to the US. I lost them because of how things went down. And I guess there's sort of the stereotype that in small towns there's a lot of drama, as this guy explained to me, and I kind of now understand why. And I think one of the things that I learned about friendship, and that I want to be the takeaway of this video, is that while having friends is great and everything, and it is, and I highly advocate for having friends, there is always a certain level of self that you need to maintain in the relationship in order to not have things blow up and turn into chaos. And the reason why I say this is, I thought, oh, it's just me, and I'll get into why I thought it was just me in a moment, but coming back to Finland, actually, when I was there in April of this year, and talking to a couple of other people who I'm friends with, who I know through various ways, but one of them, for instance, was an American girl who she had this very robust friend clique, I'll call it. They were all in the same program together. There were 7 of them who hung out together, and they were all inseparable. Like, they moved in a unit, as I say, which I often see a lot of Finnish people do, and it's kind of funny to me because it's something that you don't really see in the US. Like, you'll just see like 8 Finnish people walking down the street in like some random city center. And it's in those moments that I'm like, is Finland really that more individualistic than the US? Because that's a very collectivist activity in my mind. But anyway, I digress. So this girl ends up telling me that, last time I saw her, that graduation happened. And since then, which happened like 7 months ago, she hasn't been friends with these people. And I was like, wow, really, what happened? And it was this whole thing about how she didn't really want them being friends with this one other guy who was in their friend clique, and then they were catching on to this, but they weren't really on board with that, and then eventually there were certain things that were going on that they didn't want to disclose to her because they were worried about how she would take it. And she's like, well, I was just trying to protect them from that guy. He's evil and all that. And that's fine. You can think anybody you want's evil. It's okay. I'm like, but at the end of the day, it's still their decision whether they want to be friends with him or not. And I realized that was sort of a hard concept for her to get. And this to me is a very clear example of when you're having a hard time, or anybody can do this, separating your own sense of self from that of which is your friend's sense of self. And of course, in our relationships, we all want what is best for everybody else in them, but there also comes a point where people are their own free moral agents, and we have to let them do what they want, regardless of who they are, how close they are, even if there are children. I don't have children, but one day when I do, I really, really want to be clear about understanding that my child is not me, and they need to make their own decisions. And I think this is hard for people. And again, I thought a lot of this had to do with me, like I have this problem, but no, it is a problem that people have. And aside from this particular illustration, which I think is a good one, there was also one where another guy that I knew who was friends with another guy I had been friends with who was no longer friends with was telling me that they stopped being friends too, and I'm like, what happened? You guys were like BFFs. I know how much he loved you guys as BFFs, and it was some sort of quarrel over a group assignment and the one guy not pulling his weight, and then that turning into a whole them not being friends thing. And I'm just like, wow, so this people being really, really close together in this small town and then falling out with each other is not just something that happens to me, it's something that happens very frequently. And now I'm going to segue into what my experience was like. I had one roommate who I was very, very close to. In fact, people would see us and they would be like, wow, how long have you guys known each other? And we're like, 1 month. And they're like, you act like you've been friends your entire lives. And the way I describe it with her is, I don't think I've ever met somebody whose brain functioned so similarly to mine. And it was one of those people, like, you could just look at each other and know what the other person was thinking, and you laughed a lot together. I felt significantly intellectually engaged in our discussions. We could analyze things, philosophize things, and we had a lot of shared experiences together. We were together all the time, and it was really nice having that level of friendship with somebody, and it was something I never experienced before. However, I then came to understand that it was sort of dangerous. Got to a point where when she wasn't there, I hadn't built a network of too many other friends, so I felt very isolated, very anxious. Again, I was also in Finland in the middle of COVID. So yeah, that maybe wasn't really setting me up for success with having a robust social network. And I'll never forget there was another guy who I was friends with who we stopped being friends after 2 months because I accidentally offended him. And one of the things that I said to him, because he was like, sorry, I'm so needy. And I'm like, that's okay. Just maybe try spreading the neediness out. Like, I saw him every day and I was getting like really tired. And this is a guy who had also confided in me that he had had some mental health challenges. And I maybe felt a sense of responsibility for him and his well-being. That's not healthy either. So I'm going to not do that again. But that's what I advocate for everybody. And I tell myself this over and over again, just spread the neediness out in terms of your friendships, and don't put all that burden onto one person, and you'll have fewer friendship issues. This is at least what I've learned works for me. And again, these are all opinions, so, you can think whatever you want about it, challenge me on it, that's fine. So, with this particular friend, there was also another friend who we became friends with because he was my friend. The ironic thing is they're still friends with each other, which is good for them, honestly. I'm happy about that. Although I do joke that I don't mind when my friends become friends with each other, but I do mind when they stop being friends with me after that happens. So there was a whole thing where there was something that I said to him that I knew was going to get back to her, and it made her upset, and then that was what kind of blew up and made her stop talking to me. And this happened during the summer between me being in Finland the first year and coming back for the second year of studying. And, I was devastated. Like, I was afraid to leave the house. I was afraid I was going to run into her, and it stressed me out a lot, and I was afraid I was going to run into this other guy, both of which were no longer friends with me after the summer. And it was that summer where I was like, this is really weird. Like, I have a problem and I need to figure out what this is. And, this is going to be an interesting thing that I'm going to share. And I'm curious to see how it will be received, because this is a topic that is very taboo. So that summer, I went to a psychiatrist, and I'm like, "There's something going on here." It's like I think that I have borderline personality disorder, and my brother describes this as the whole talking to God interview kind of thing, because they ask you a lot of things that you don't really want to talk to other people about. And at the end of it, he's like, "Yeah, you seem pretty all over the place. This seems like it could be borderline personality disorder." And that was really hard. It was really hard to admit, like, wow, there's something wrong with me. Now, what I've come to realize in, the 2 years since I've gotten that diagnosis, it's probably actually been exactly 2 years as of 11 days ago. I think it was July 20th or something, 2022, is that, I'm not the only person who has this problem. They say 2% of the population has it, and just like with narcissism, people do have BPD or borderline personality disorder tendencies. But, I felt like something was like wrong with me. And now I've come more around to, just in the same way that nobody asked to have health issues, nobody asked to have mental health issues either, and they are real issues. I spent most of my life thinking mental health was stupid, that, people were just weak and they couldn't deal with their own problems, and then they were blaming it on mental health. No, that's not how it is. And in fact, I think mental health is the hardest thing to treat because it is so invisible. Like, you can see the symptoms of it and the issues that it causes in people's lives, but you don't really know how to go about treating it. Okay, well, the easy answer to that is you go to therapy and, maybe medication. BPD people don't necessarily benefit too much from medication. I did try it, and I think it did help me. It was for a time, and it helped me get through a tough time, and that's why I am pretty pro antidepressants. For a long time, I wasn't, and it took me a very, very long time to destigmatize myself against them and think that they were okay for me to try. I feel like when I did try them, and my mom knew about it, I feel like I've never seen my mom be so disappointed in me in my life. But then she got over it. Anyway, so it was really hard for me knowing that, oh, I have this thing. And I spent like the entire next year like obsessively researching it, to the point where I think I've read almost every top page Google search about BPD questions that are possibly out there. And yeah, I learned a lot about the disorder, and I think that really helped me, because now if I start exhibiting some behavior, I can call myself out pretty quickly and be like, hey, that's, a BPD thing. Don't do that. And a lot of the lack of boundary, lack of sense of self is associated with this disorder, as is low self-worth. So then I had to accept that, oh, do I have low self-worth? Which was confusing to me, because I'm like, wow, I've achieved so many things. How do I have low self-worth? Well, then I had to realize that, yeah, my self-worth is not tied to my achievements. It's tied to the kind of person I am. And another thing I had heard recently is that if you think about how hard it is to change yourself, you will think about how ridiculous it is to try and change somebody else. Relating this a lot to relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, whatever. People are who they are, and just like you need to accept yourself, you do need to accept other people too. I mean, do you need to? Need is a strong word, but, I believe you'll be happier if you do. I also have been advocating for, learning to really have good self-worth is the way that you will make all of your interactions with other people peaceable, including your own relationship with yourself will become better, the better you feel about yourself. I mean, it makes sense. People like to be around other people who make themselves feel good. You will like being with and around yourself if you make yourself feel good. Okay, so I guess that's it for that story time. Oh, something I would like to share also. So the guy who wrote the 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene, I was listening to an interview with him yesterday, and he was talking about how when he was writing the section on narcissism, that he was starting to get worried that he was like, I identify with so many of these tendencies. And he was talking about how you really have to understand yourself well and have that level of self-awareness to be able to change yourself. And maybe at this point, I do look at those struggles that I went through with friendships as a blessing, because it allowed me to become much more self-aware than I ever could have if I hadn't gone through those things, despite how challenging they really were. And, how much it created fear, maybe, of me, being afraid that I couldn't have successful friendships again, which eventually, again, I got over, and I realized, people are going to be my friend. Like, and I always say, to have friends, you have to be a friend. And I have a world full of friends who really appreciate me, want to be my friend. I mean, I have a whole YouTube channel full of supporters and subscribers and commenters who also think I'm a great person, and I appreciate that a lot. And now that I feel more liberated, maybe in this cognitive sense, I really want other people to feel empowered, to feel good about themselves, to go get the information out there that can allow you to become more self aware and work on the challenges that you have. So, yeah, I think after that, those friendships, I started to, learn more about the disorder. And what I learned is that people with BPD need people with strong boundaries and big hearts. And I thought about the other really close friends that I had in Finland, one from the US and one from Finland, and how both of them were those people for me, and how emotionally supportive they were of me. How, even though I was kind of dramatic, right, this is like a stereotype about BPD people, and maybe I would, need to complain or vent about challenges I find with other people, they were always very accepting of that and never made me feel badly about myself, and like I was sort of like a burden to them, right? I think burden is a very big trigger word for me. Here's Harley, he's moving. And yeah, so again, you won't feel like you're a burden if you have a good sense of self-worth. So I worked on trying to get that back, and it took me a really long time. It took me like years of therapy and trying medication, and the medication was amazing. Like, I mean, it feels like it resets maybe like years of unprocessed trauma. I know we talk about trauma a lot. And I had a therapist say to me, like, it helps you be the best version of yourself. And now I feel like I'm finally at that point, and it took me my whole life to get here. So going back to, what does this teach me about friendship? Friendship is a very powerful tool, and choose your friends wisely, because your friends do affect your inner world. People that you let in very closely have the ability to affect you and how you feel about yourself much more strongly than if you don't let those people in. Because when you're spending so much time by yourself, and I'm guilty of this in the US, you're sort of in this echo chamber of, all your thoughts and beliefs and views and opinions are absolute. And no, there's a whole world out there of people who share different views and ideas than you do. And I personally feel like it's very important to be exposed to those, but also to be respectful and, constantly examine what you believe and what your values are, but also allowing other people to influence you where you want them to. But, looking back to Finland, it's like, do I have some regrets? No, because of how much I learned, but it's sort of like putting myself in the same situation again. I don't desire that level of, constantly being around another person again, unless it was like a romantic relationship. That's a little bit different. But, in terms of friendships, I've really learned that the power of friendship, it's really two-sided, and your friends are not you. They're their own independent people, and you should support what they want to do, not just look at, oh well, if they're around it's going to be beneficial for me, which I've maybe felt that way, or I've had people feel that way about me, and my opinion is that can be kind of dangerous. So I learned that yes, relationships are valuable, but relationships are also something you have to pay a lot of attention to. There's something you need to communicate about. I think that maybe some of the heartache in these relationships could have been avoided if I was more transparent about needing more me time. If I kept my regimen of working out every day, which I normally do in the US, it creates space for me to be able to have a relationship with myself and think and process and analyze things. And I mean, I hope that I never end up in another situation where I become very close to somebody and then I lose them again. And that's kind of why I've learned to understand that boundaries exist, which again is a big thing that BPD people struggle with. I think also once I started figuring out I had BPD and I tried to read about it online, there's a lot of really negative, nasty things out there about it. And the only thing I have to say is, as annoying as the person is who probably has BPD, the person who has it themselves is probably suffering in a way that you can't even perceive if you yourself don't have the illness. If you Google it, it will actually say that BPD is arguably the most painful mental illness to live with because of how rapidly your emotions fluctuate and how your views of people and situations are so unstable. Yeah, I probably confuse a lot of people on my YouTube channel with what I talk about. Maybe that's why. So, yeah, and I also found that a lot of other stuff I was reading about with those people was that, like, people who have a hard time, like, holding down jobs or, like, their relationships are super crazy, which, wasn't something I really struggled with until Finland. Maybe that, the way my brother explains it, is it got, activated or triggered, whereas normally it's kind of dormant. Like, I feel like it probably is right now, despite that I've had, other challenges before moving to Finland, but yeah. So, I guess this video is essentially about how friendship in Finland helped me learn more about my own mental health, rather than necessarily what it taught me about friendship. But again, from my own perspective of friendship, I think it's taught me that friendship is a very important tool when used correctly, which means that you and your friend are not the same person, and that if you communicate, you have expectations, because I did learn by reading this Atlas of the Heart book by Brene Brown yesterday that disappointment is much more related to unfulfilled expectations. And when you have expectations placed upon people that don't come true, it's hard. And that's why you get disappointed. But did you ever communicate those expectations? A lot of people do often fail to do this. So I guess with my friends in the future, I try my best to keep in touch with them, but it is never at the expense of me needing to feel good every day, whether that's exercising every day like I like to do, or having me time where I feel independent and I feel like my own entity in the world. Well, that's everything I have to say on this topic. It's getting very personal, but much more story oriented, and I hope it was interesting. I really care a lot about these mental health topics, and maybe that's why I decided to make this video. I thought it was kind of weird with me making the YouTube at the beginning, because I'm like, oh, it's like it can be a job for me, because maybe I'm a workaholic, as you already know from my other video. But one of the things that I was told by my therapist, because I go to one of those, is that making these videos can help people. And I'm like, okay, that's a good way to look at it, because I don't always think about me as being the most helpful person, and maybe that's a dialogue that I've taken on because of things that I've been told over the years by my parents. And I need to just feel good about myself regardless of that. And, I do hope these videos help people and inspire people that, in spite of mental illness, you can still have a productive life. I mean, I appreciate the amazing things that I've been able to do in spite of having a mental illness, like, working at NASA, winning all these really cool scholarships that are prestigious. Not that I care about that part, but the experiences I had related to those was truly amazing. And I'm happy to talk more on this topic, because I don't think there is enough support for this particular mental illness that I've seen out there. If you know of any resources and you want to tell me, let me know. And that's everything that I can think of related to this. This is probably my longest video now. So I hope it was interesting, and I'll talk more about life in Finland probably, but I need some more ideas, so please throw some recommendations at me in the comments. And that's all for today. So thank you everybody for listening if you got this far in the video, and have a nice day, and until my next video, bye!